Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. This is my recap for the anime Deranged Detective. If you like my recaps, please consider subscribing. The story begins as a woman who was a bit too generous with some lipstick, named Amamaya, is furious to hear that there has been a fifth victim and the culprit has the same MO. She urgently instructs her investigators to expand the scope of the investigation, but turns to our protagonist named Totomaro and tells him that he can just go home and sleep. Totomaro portrays a tireless warrior by explaining that he is completely capable of working through 2 nights in a row and he can power through how tired he is. Amamaya doesn't want to be misunderstood and ruthlessly explains that someone as useless as him hanging around will only make things harder. Afterwards, a man named Kiko sympathizes with the discount detective since if Totomaro doesn't show some results soon, he might get kicked out of Investigation Division 1. Kiko reminds Totomaro how much of a garbage detective he is since he was once fooled by a culprit and let them get away 3 times. As if that wasn't bad enough, Totomaro has also had the cops called on him after he went into a neighborhood after dark to get some statements. Kiko likes how earnest Totomaro is, but points out that side of him makes him a terrible detective. Totomaro shows that he isn't a terrible person though, as he points out that all the citizens are terrified with the serial murders going on, and it's agonizing for him to just stand by. The old man clearly has something planned when he strangely licks his fingers to point out that there are already 5 victims, and there haven't been any significant developments in the investigation. Investigation Division 1 is clearly having trouble, so he thinks that there is only one person who can crack the case. This person is a bit of a sleuth, and he is definitely not an ordinary detective. Totomaro goes to the guy's apartment and admires how sleek the sleuth looks in a picture. The sleuth works as the building manager, so Totomaro wonders if it's because his detective business isn't doing so well. Totomaro goes to ring the bell, but is shocked to hear a voice say, "Don't get your hopes up." A second attempt at the bell, and the voice says, "Do it yourself." Totomaro's confusion only upsets the voice since it doesn't like that kind of attitude from someone asking him for a favor. The voice tells him to go back to the shrine and ask the gods for help again. Totomaro has no clue how the voice knew that he did that, and the voice tells him to go away. Totomaro explains that Kiko sent him, which gets the guy to come out, but Totomaro is shocked by his look. This guy has a clump of seaweed where his hair should be and is all tatted up, which is much different from his clean past. Not only that, his eyes are completely dead now. They don't even reflect light anymore, and even a dead fish's eyes do that. Totomaro welcomes himself inside the guy's apartment and wonders if the guy's cat is dead. It's not, and the guy named Komonohashi explains that he went to school with Kiko's son. Kiko is worried that Komonohashi just sits around crying all day, and he can't say it isn't true. Totomaro panics when Komonohashi smashes his face into the ground, but realizes that the floor is covered in cushions. Komonohashi explains that it's his floor of laziness, and it knows his daily routine of despair and boredom. Komonohashi doesn't have a TV, internet, or even a cell phone. Nothing good comes from the outside, so he cut off the world. He is completely withdrawn and claims that he has hit the depths of despair. He tries to get rid of Totomaro so he can continue enjoying his floor of laziness, but Totomaro tells him that he needs something. Komonohashi refuses without even hearing what it is and explains that he isn't the first to come to him. Kiko has sent others to be his partner as well. Young, brilliant officers only interested in promotions. He turned them all away after knocking them down a peg. It's clear that Kiko really wants to help him make a comeback, but Komonohashi reveals that he is not a detective anymore. Totomaro tries to tell him about the murders, but Komonohashi just screams really loudly to drown him out. Totomaro points out that he's trying to say something, but Komonohashi tells him that that's fine since he's trying to keep him from talking anyway. Still not moving a single inch from his glorious floor of laziness, Komonohashi explains that he doesn't want anything to do with unsolved cases and refuses to listen. Totomaro points out that people's lives are on the line, but the floor-loving jerk states that it's not his problem. Totomaro concludes that Komonohashi is way too depressed and there's no way he would be able to deduce anything. Komonohashi is glad to see him leaving and tells Totomaro that he's better off asking the gods for help anyway. Totomaro wonders how he knew about the shrine, and this is where we get our first glimpse of Komonohashi's brilliance. He points out the pine pollen on Totomaro's shoulder and explains that he could only have gotten that from a specific path near the shrine. Totomaro's unopened can of coffee in his pocket and jangling of the change in his other pocket made him realize that Totomaro broke a bill in order to offer a coin to the gods at the shrine. Of course, Todoromaru is amazed by his deduction skills, but Kemonohashi doesn't stop there. The lazy genius uses several of Todoromaru's behaviors to deduce that he was raised by his grandparents. He's also able to tell that Todoromaru is worried about getting fired, which is why he came for help. Kemonohashi, seemingly unable to put a stop to his own godlike detective skills, keeps going, but Todoromaru stops listening since he's already convinced that this way too depressed guy might be able to solve the case. Unfortunately, Kemonohashi continues to refuse, so Todoromaru comes up with a brilliant idea to yell the case details as loud as he can. His genius plan is foiled though when he notices that Kemonohashi has earplugs on. Todoromaru desperately pleads with him, but everything stops when Todoromaru gets a call from his boss. Kemonohashi takes his earplugs out to tell him not to take calls there, but it's too late. Amamiya explains that there has been a sixth victim and their body was found at a park in Shibuya. Todoromaru is the closest, so she rushes him to investigate. He prepares to leave but is shocked as something strange begins to happen to Kemonohashi. Kemonohashi explains that once he learns about a case, he can't hold himself back any longer, but he can't be allowed to solve cases anymore. He states that of course he wants to be a detective. Unraveling mysteries and solving cases is what gives meaning to his life. Not being able to makes him feel like he's going to go insane. That's why he cut himself off from the world, avoided people, and lived as a hermit by being a day sleeper. The problem is that he has a fatal flaw as a detective. A truly troublesome one that no doctor has been able to fix. Todoromaru, showing off his probably not so good detective skills, deduces that Kemonohashi must be sick. His body must be incredibly weak and frail, which is why he made the floor out of cushions. Kemonohashi demands that he leave and states that as long as he takes sleeping pills to knock himself out for 3 days, he will be okay. Todoromaru refuses to leave without him since he doesn't want Kemonohashi to waste his talents and points out that there is nothing more important than stopping criminals. Kemonohashi tries to tell him that that's not the issue, but Todoromaru begs for Kemonohashi to trust him and promises to back him up however he needs. Kemonohashi can't believe how naive he is as he calls him a fool, but does agree to help. However, he tells Todoromaru to listen carefully as he explains that no matter what, Todoromaru cannot take his eyes off of him. Todoromaru, clearly oblivious to what's really going on, promises to push Kemonohashi in a wheelchair if he starts feeling sick. Kemonohashi has no clue what he's talking about and informs Todoromaru that they will be running to the crime scene. The run has Todoromaru questioning his life choices, showcasing his undeniable talent for couch marathons over actual ones, and Kemonohashi explains that he stays fit as a hermit using the gym he built in his apartment. They are informed that the victim was a private investment broker named Okamasa, and he was on his way to a business party the night before. Kemonohashi then shocks everyone when he gets up close and personal with the stiff. Even more strangely, he begins to speak to it. He asks it how it could drown in a place with no water, and why did he hand over his valuables without a fight. The policeman is shocked since Kemonohashi has no knowledge of the other victims, but seems to know a lot about what happened. Kemonohashi explains that corpses want to talk and you just have to learn to listen. The white froth on its mouth indicates the possibility of drowning. Clothes show no signs of struggle, and his suit shows that he was wealthy. The tan line on his wrist says that his watch was stolen. Todoromaru seems to just now realize what a good detective looks like and is amazed to see that he's totally correct. Over the last 9 months, 5 people have been killed at irregular intervals with that exact MO. All their valuables were stolen, but they had no external injuries. Testing revealed no alcohol or drugs in their system, and they were all found drowned in places with no water. Kemonohashi looks at a map showing where the victims were last seen and where they were believed to be going. On it are a date, a celebration, a class reunion, a wedding, and a birthday party. He uses it to narrow down the search area, but Todoromaru points out that there's nowhere in that area with enough water to drown in. Still not realizing that he's terrible at his job, he also points out that he can't even think of a place where a grown man can be drowned without him putting up a fight. Luckily for Todoromaru, Kemonohashi isn't useless like him and has thought of a great place where that could happen. He's glad to see that he isn't rusty, even after a 5-year hiatus, and celebrates with his new friend. Everyone is shocked to see him be so casual with a dead body, but he explains that it's just his style. He states that if you treat them with respect and kindness, the dead will open their hearts to you. Kemonohashi tells them that it's time to go, and shocks everyone once more when he reveals that it's time to arrest the culprit. Todoromaru can't believe that he already knows who it is, since the police investigated for 9 months and couldn't crack the case. The master of deduction explains that that's what he's there for, but Todoromaru still can't believe it took him only like 3 minutes. Kemonohashi calls him Todo and tells him to get out some money as they leave. Moments later, they're at a clothing store where Todo finds himself dressed up like a pimp. Kemonohashi tells the rapper Wannabe that he'll be going undercover as a wealthy man, and they will also have to do something about his hideous head of hair. They go to get him a haircut, and Todoromaru states that he will probably fall asleep since he has worked 2 nights in a row. Kemonohashi is surprised to hear that he isn't the only idiot that has stayed up 2 nights for work, but recommends that Todo should stay awake. Todoromaru begins to think that Kemonohashi might be a bit unstable and wonders if he should really be following what he says. I guess he just ignores that feeling as he heads inside and prepares for his haircut by removing his ridiculous looking coat while Kemonohashi enjoys some black sugar syrup outside. The barber is amazed to hear that Todo has done well in the stock market and has him put his head in a shampoo station. After a moment, the man checks to see if Todo will respond to him, but Todo doesn't say a word. This barber is clearly evil as he begins to fill the basin with water to drown Todo, but Kemonohashi arrives to stop him. He explains to the sinister stylist that lockpicking is a hobby of his, just as Todoromaru emerges from the water. He tells Kemonohashi that he held his breath for a minute just like he told him to do, but he still has no clue what is happening. Kemonohashi explains that he was going to be murdered in a way that only a barber could pull off. The genius detective then reveals his deductions. None of the victims had any drugs in their system, but they didn't put up a fight either. The secret behind this is that the shampoo station was filled with oxygen deficient air. Air with an oxygen saturation below 18. If a person takes a single breath of air when it's less than 10, they faint. This could easily be achieved by using some dry ice. If Todoromaru had breathed in, he would have passed out and drowned. The next clue was that the victims were all men whose hair was growing out. They all had big events lined up like parties and reunions that they'd naturally want to look good for, so going to a barber made sense. This absolute genius of a human being then narrowed things down even further by determining that it had to be a shop targeting new customers, so he focused on places in the victims' overlapping areas of movement that accepted walk-ins. The scene of the crime also had to be somewhere people couldn't see in from the outside, and somewhere you could get dry ice nearby. This guy's barbershop fit all the criteria. Kemonohashi is almost done showing off his 1000 IQ when he states that the barber profession lends itself to chatting up clients so the killer could learn all sorts of things about his victims. To use that against him, Kemonohashi had Todo dress in expensive clothes and tell a story about hitting it big in stocks. He made him play exactly the kind of wealthy walk-in the culprit prefers. The murderous scissor wielder who just stood there and listened to that entire speech just now realizes that they are cops and tries to run. The detectives corner the psycho barber and he explains that he was murdering people for the money. Todoromaru is disappointed to hear he killed 6 people just for money, so the barber explains that he doesn't feel guilty at all since he was screwed over by the rich first. He has crippling debt, but Kemonohashi couldn't care less, and he shocks Todoromaru when he tells the barber to jump off the building. He states that someone who devalues the lives of others has no right to keep living in this world, and instructs him to jump again. Todoromaru can't believe what he is hearing, and we see that something happens with Kemonohashi's eyes that makes the barber agree to do it. Todo is worried that people might listen to Kemonohashi when he makes crazy demands like that, and sees that the barber is actually going to do it. Kemonohashi writhes in pain, so Todoromaru is left to try and stop the man. Kemonohashi seems to snap out of it, and Todoromaru explains that the man jumped. Kemonohashi is completely beside himself as he exclaims that he did it again, and wished he never trusted someone else. However, he's shocked when Todoromaru tells him to stop muttering and help him. Kemonohashi is clearly a genius, but even he can't believe that Todo managed to save the culprit. Kemonohashi wonders if without any hesitation whatsoever, Todo put his own life on the line, but then realizes that isn't it at all. Instead, it's the opposite. Todo's just a pure naive fool, and his body must react before reason kicks in. Todoromaru wants him to stop talking to himself like a lunatic and help him, but Todo ends up falling. Just before gravity can introduce Todoromaru to the pavement below, Kemonohashi saves them both. He proudly announces that he has changed his mind and now feels that there are infinite possibilities. At his house, Todoromaru's mouth nearly drops to the floor as Kemonohashi reveals that his flaw is actually a sickness where he kills the culprit. He explains that he has no conscious memory of doing so, but apparently he always pressures the culprits to their death. By the time he comes back to his senses, it's too late. That's why his solved case rate is an amazing 100%, but his arrest rate is an insanely low 0%. That's why he was forbidden to act as a detective and why he cut himself off from cases. However, Todo has broken his disgraceful streak, and it's clear now why Kiko sent Todamaru. What Kiko must have realized was that Kemonohashi doesn't need some brilliant partner at his side. What he needs is a pure naive fool. Todamaru realizes he is this fool, and Kemonohashi tells him that they will be partners. He tells him to bring every case he stumbles upon to him. Kemonohashi explains that he will let Todamaru take all the credit, so starting today he will be a great detective. A look into the past shows a classroom full of shocked students. They all gasp in amazement when they see that one student managed to crack a case. The murder was a cold case and everyone said it would never be solved. They all agree that the new student is unbelievable, the greatest the school has ever seen, and begin to wonder how he can understand how criminals think. This feat was so incredible that the professor explains that once this student graduates, it could be the end of unsolved cases around the world. We find that this student was Kemonohashi. He was flattered by their praise and stated how devoting himself to becoming a detective was his life's calling. Back to the present, Todamaru goes to see Kemonohashi and is surprised to see that the once sad, depressed loner is now excited to hear what their next case is. He hopes for a case that will send his heart dancing, but there really isn't one. This bad news sends Kemonohashi straight to his floor of laziness, where he mumbles frantically. Todo tells him to speak up, so he does, but it's only to call Todo useless. Kemonohashi tells him that he is wasting his overflowing passion for solving mysteries and the greatest talent Blue has ever seen. He explains that Blue is the world's preeminent detective training academy, and an incredible 100% of the best detectives graduated from there. The best of all of them was Kemonohashi. He had the top scores, and they said he was the greatest genius to ever grace the school. This is incredible to Todamaru, but Kemonohashi explains that something went terribly wrong. During a practical exercise, all of the suspects Kemonohashi went after died, which put him under suspicion. He was expelled from Blue and barred from obtaining a detective's license. A detective's license is a passport he needs to solve the toughest mysteries. Without it, he is not permitted access to any case, and if he breaks the rules, Blue will punish him with death. Todamaru, a genius in his own right, points out that Kemonohashi was just investigating the case he just solved. Kemonohashi says that that was unavoidable, but from now on the surface, Todo will be doing the investigating, while he controls Todo from behind the scenes. Todo likes the idea, but doesn't like the sound of being controlled. Kemonohashi apologizes for his poor choice of words, and explains that what he meant to say was that Todo is his puppet. Things won't be so bad, as Kemonohashi states that all he will do is conceal his identity, go with Todo to crime scenes, and give him instructions. Todo wonders if he could just do that over the phone, but Kemonohashi refuses. He wants to pay his respects to the dead and meet them for himself. His plan sounds great in theory, but Todo explains that he isn't the one who decides who the big cases go to. That's his boss, Amamiya. Kemonohashi, who has practically become one with his beloved floor of laziness, instantly starts doing his genius detective thing on a picture of Amamiya. Todo is in the picture, so he wasn't the one that took it. The reason neither of them are looking at the camera is that it was taken in secret. He is correct, and Todo explains that a coworker who says he wants Amamiya-senpai to step on him sent it to him. Todo reveals that he's scared of Miss Permanent Scowl and recounts what happened earlier that day. A body was found, so she prepared to investigate it, and the always eager Todamaru asked to go with them. Miss Neversmile declined, but gave him something else to do, and put the assignment in his binder. Kemonohashi is surprised to hear that Todamaru is taken seriously enough to have his own binder like the others, but Todo explains that it's just filled with odd jobs or low priority cases. People secretly call it the trash bin. Kemonohashi surprisingly gives comforting words when he states that one day Todamaru will have the last laugh, but instantly kind of ruins it when he hilariously adds, one day the trash man will rule over all of humanity. As for today's trash, Todamaru explains that there was a report about missing money from a piggy bank, and it ended up at Division 1 by some mistake. It's what could be called an utterly impossible crime, but Todamaru assumes that Kemonohashi doesn't seem like he'd be interested in the theft of small change. He couldn't be more wrong, however, as this case surprisingly manages to peel Kemonohashi away from his trusty floor of laziness. Kemonohashi instantly disguises himself and explains that the duty of solving cases everyone else has abandoned falls to him, the most talented man in Blue's history. Todo steps on his seemingly dead cat, but Kemonohashi tells him it's just sleeping. At the scene, Kemonohashi introduces himself as Kamu with Piggy Bank Emergency Services. It seems like Todo wasn't informed of this as he freaks out, telling Kemonohashi to pick a normal name, since if he is found out, then he is a dead man. Just then, Kemonohashi mistakes a pink suitcase for the piggy bank. They note how big it is, and the homeowner explains that it belongs to her older sister who just returned home. She directs them to the living room where we find that Kemonohashi knows way too much about piggy banks. He's amazed by this model as it's the one with a rubber valve from which it is completely impossible to remove coins, the impregnable pig. Toromaru's amazed by his knowledge, but the genius detective reveals that he just used Todo's phone to Google it. The pig isn't the most popular color, and the girl explains that it's all her local store had left. She begins to explain that she noticed it was lighter when she returned home the day before, but Kemonohashi interrupts her when he gets his mustache caught while looking at her older sister's jewelry. Toromaru wonders if he only came to get in the way, but Kemonohashi points out how strange it is that the thief didn't steal the exposed jewelry. That's not all that's weird, as the girl reveals that they were getting a lot of silent calls recently. This makes things incredibly clear for Kemonohashi, which makes Todo think he has cracked the case, but he actually says that he gave up. This is because an impregnable piggy bank in a locked house is truly an utterly impossible crime. Just as Toromaru is shocked to see him chowing down on undiluted black sugar syrup, the older sister arrives. She explains that she was visiting her parents and she thinks that her younger sister is just imagining things. Toromaru thinks that she didn't really provide any new information, so Kemonohashi wonders if they should just chalk it up to a trick of the mind. The little sister becomes frustrated as she is certain she didn't imagine anything, and exclaims that the pig was as heavy as an iron statue before. That's exactly what Kemonohashi wanted to hear, and states that if that's the case, then they should break the piggy bank open. After they do, the girl is certain that there was more change in there, but there's no way to be certain. She goes to count it, but Kemonohashi instantly stops her. He explains that Todo will be sending them to forensics for fingerprinting, and shocks Todo when he says he will be going for a walk. They meet up later just as Toromaru is told that the younger sister's fingerprints were not on any of the coins. Toromaru is shocked to hear that Kemonohashi expected that, but way more surprised to find that they are at Amamaya's crime scene. She reminds Toromaru that he wasn't supposed to come, but Kemonohashi doesn't even address her and shocks everyone when he goes into the crime scene. Kemonohashi finally addresses her, but it's only to ask what she would do if Toromaru solved her case. Angry boss lady will allow him to try, but explains that if he can't make her happy, then he is fired. Kemonohashi doubles down on his shocking behavior by getting up close and personal with the corpse again. He tells it that he is glad to finally meet him and vows to avenge his death. Kemonohashi tosses a bag to Toromaru and tells him that he is up. Moments later, Toromaru addresses everyone and begins by solving the mystery of the piggy bank. Amamaya wants him to just skip that part since petty cases like that have nothing to do with Investigation Division 1. Toromaru is startled, but Kemonohashi quickly retorts that it was a case from Investigation Division 1's trash bin. Toromaru proceeds by explaining that, according to the forensic results, the coins in the piggy bank only have the older sister's prints on them. The older sister assumes that it means that only the money her sister put in was stolen, but that can't be since you can't take money out without breaking it. Toromaru struggles to answer, but Kemonohashi calms him down and reminds him of the little gift he got Todo while on his walk. Toromaru explains that getting the coins out without breaking the bank is impossible, but replacing a broken one entirely isn't. Everyone is shocked as he explains that there weren't fewer coins inside because they were stolen, the previous bank was just broken. And in order to hide that, someone purchased a replacement and put the other coins inside. He accuses the older sister, but she points out that she wouldn't have to hide something like that and would just tell her little sister. Toromaru is flustered again, but Kemonohashi points out to him that his voice is beginning to crack and calms him down once more. The recomposed Toromaru explains that her reason for hiding it is right there on the riverbank. He shocks everyone more as he states that it was a murder. Things really come to light when he explains that the man was her stalker and he was the one making the silent phone calls. He waited for her one day and chased her into her own living room. There was the piggy bank as heavy as an iron statue, so she struck and killed him with it. When she did, the piggy bank shattered and blood got all over the coins. In order to conceal her crime, she bought a new one and tried to fill it with other coins. That's why only her prints are on them. Finally, she brought the body there. She used the suitcase in the entryway to move it. Given its size, it's far too large for just an overnight stay with her parents. Amamaya can't believe the two mysteries were connected, and Toromaru's just relieved that he managed to say everything. The little sister refuses to believe it all, but the older sister crumbles under her own guilt and admits to everything. Todoromaru tries to point out how it was the stalker's fault, but Amamiya explains that concealing a murder is still a legitimate crime. Before anyone can even digest what just happened, Kemonohashi shockingly steps forward and tells the older sister to go drown. He states that someone who kills another and hides it has no right to live in this world. Todoromaru is stunned to see that Kemonohashi is doing that thing where he pressures criminals to death, and doing it right in front of everyone. Amamiya strangely admires how cool what he is doing is, but Todoromaru rushes in to tell everyone that he's just talking to himself. Kemonohashi is still in that mode as he tells her to drown herself in the river, and we see that his eyes have hypnotized her. She rushes off to drown herself, and Kemonohashi can't help but repeat the words "go drown" over and over. Amamiya stops her for a moment, but the girl gets away. The older sister repeats those same words and begins to drown herself. However, just then, our impulsive protagonist acts without thinking at all and dives in after her. After a tense moment, the girl is relieved to see that her sister is safe. Moments later, Kemonohashi snaps back to reality, consumed with guilt when he realizes that he once again pressured someone to take their own life. However, the genius detective is able to find some relief since she is safe, and he has Todo to thank for that. Later, Detective Always Cranky explains to Todoromaru that the case has been closed. They found fragments of the piggy bank and the stalker's hair. His blood and prints were also at the house. If they acknowledge that the acts were in self-defense, they may take that into consideration for her dumping his body as well. Todoromaru hopes they do, but Amamiya points out that there are more pressing matters, and tells Todoromaru that him and his friend violated regulations. Todoromaru expects her to completely blow up with rage, but when he lies and tells her that his friend's name is Kamu, she instantly changes her attitude. Later, Todoromaru goes to see Kemonohashi and is shocked when he asks for the next case that will send his heart dancing. He says he was just kidding, but it's clear that he wasn't when his body goes completely limp. Todoromaru can't help but think that Kemonohashi is really odd. He is obsessed with cases and is unreasonable, so Todoromaru never wants to work with him again. Kemonohashi composes himself to tell Todo to hold his head up high, since for a pure naive fool, he did incredibly good work. Todo accepts yet another backhanded compliment, and thinks that, despite all of Kemonohashi's flaws, Todo still has a part of himself that is hoping for another difficult case. A part that's looking forward to Kemonohashi's deductions and the thrill of solving a mystery. Kemonohashi wants to mark the day a special occasion, and shocks Todo when he states that it's the day his puppet was born. Elsewhere, Blue's principal, Emi, is asked if she remembers the man named Kemonohashi. Of course she remembers, as he was the man with the highest marks in the history of Blue. She is told that he has been suspected of resuming detective work. The instructor of disguise wonders if that may be the end of unsolved cases as they know them in Japan, but another instructor reminds him that all of the culprits in the case he handled died. They all fear that Kemonohashi may give rise to yet another tragedy, which is why they expelled him and barred him from obtaining a detective license in the first place. The principal makes her decision. Blue's entire goal is to train detectives to ensure that justice is never overshadowed by evil, so they cannot have a detective who kills people. For this reason, she orders an investigation of Kemonohashi, and the menacing-looking tracking instructor volunteers to do it. The principal makes it very clear to this guy that looks like he has bad intentions that their goal is nothing more than to verify the intel they received. She fears that if they agitate Kemonohashi, then it will only give him the opportunity to escape. She tells the tracking instructor to refrain from direct contact as much as possible. Even if he catches him in the act of sleuthing, he is to report back first. Kemonohashi is in great danger as the principal explains that if they find that he is acting as a detective, they cannot allow another tragedy to happen again, and he will have to be punished to the greatest extent. Meanwhile, Todoromaru receives a call and urgently rushes to Japan's version of Walmart with a cat mascot. Foolishly, he expected an emergency, but is shocked to find that Kemonohashi is just upset that they won't let him start a tab, and Kemonohashi just wants Todo to pay for his stuff. Todoromaru thought that Blue was after Kemonohashi's life or something, but Kemonohashi points out that it's much worse than that. His cat's life is on the line if it doesn't get some food in its belly. Todoromaru can't believe Kemonohashi has survived this long without shopping for himself before, but Kemonohashi explains that people from the apartments bring him things. The two are given a ticket for a raffle where they need to spin a wheel to decide their prize. Seemingly forgetting about his probably already dead cat, Kemonohashi gets really into it. He thinks they should play rock, paper, scissors to see who spins the thing, but Todoromaru just lets him do it. Todoromaru couldn't be less enthused, but Raffleman can tell Kemonohashi's going to get something good since he's raring to go. Kemonohashi gives the thing a good turn, and the man loudly announces that he has won the grand prize, a hot spring vacation. This guy says it's perfect for the two of them since it's a couples package, but Totemaru's the only one that tries to correct him. Kemonohashi decides that he will just go by himself twice, but that's not how it works. They have no choice but to go together. Kemonohashi registers himself as Camu, and Totemaru as the pure naive detective, much to Toto's disliking. They leave, but we see that the tracking instructor has already found him, and now knows about the hot spring vacation. On their way there, their driver gives them a pamphlet of the inn, and he explains how lucky they are since it was pouring rain the day before. He also tells them a charming story about how long ago, fall leaves on the mountain turned a certain crimson called Beni. A lord saw it reflected in the hot spring, and that's how Benizome Hot Springs got its name. Totemaru begins to change his mind about the entire thing, as everything looks very beautiful and extremely relaxing in the pamphlet. However, Kemonohashi tells the driver that they won tickets for the annex building, and the man's tone completely changes as he apologizes profusely. He gives them a different pamphlet that's just for the annex building, but Totemaru is shocked to see that it's just some hand-drawn junk. The man drops them off near the annex building and leaves faster than when my dad went to get the milk. They quickly realize why when they see that the annex building looks pretty run down, like a typhoon hit just this one spot. They are welcomed by the inn owners and their purple-haired employee, who is actually the tracking instructor in disguise. The guy that looks like he washed his hair with grape juice thanks Totemaru for his service with the police force. Totemaru has no clue how he knew his job, and the man explains that it was because of Totemaru's shoes. The leather of the toes are scuffed, and that only happens if you run all out in them. The only professionals who run in their leather shoes are police detectives chasing down criminals. Totemaru is amazed by his deduction, but Kemonohashi doesn't want Toto to be fooled. He explains that when it comes to professionals running in leather shoes, he points out that a reporter might be just as likely. Kemonohashi out-deduces the other guy, as he is determined that he only knew Toto was a cop because that is what Kemonohashi put on the reservation form. We see that old purple hair is actually impressed, but he just explains that it's a little welcoming trick he likes to do. Inside, the man explains that the bath is open anytime up until 8 AM the next day, and dinner will be served later at 7 PM. Kemonohashi can't stop deducing the heck out of everything, and realizes that with the dinner at a predetermined time, that must mean other guests are there as well. He is of course right, as there are 3 other parties there. The two head to their room, and we see that the instructor is strangely excited. He is amazed by Kemonohashi's deduction, as it confirms that it's really him. Very soon after, the guys enjoy a bath, but Kemonohashi wishes it was crimson like in the driver's story. He reveals that the driver's story is just what they tell the public, but there is also a secret legend. The river there often overflows, and this caused problems for the villagers. The brilliant villagers decided to sacrifice a young lady to it, and the next day the floodwater went away. However, they say that for days afterward, the river and hot spring ran crimson. Totemaru is in disbelief of the terrifying story, and Kemonohashi explains that it was in the handmade pamphlet the driver gave them. Just then, Totemaru notices that Kemonohashi's tattoo is bigger than he thought. Kemonohashi explains that it's actually a scar. He once suffered injuries all over his body, but that was the only one that scarred. It looks like a number, and Kemonohashi says that is why he likes it so much. It looks like the number 6, which is a number he associates with his birth. To help Toto understand, he compares it to Toto having a tattoo of his grandma since he loves her so much. Afterwards, they go to dinner where Totemaru is shocked by the clump of slime Kemonohashi ordered. Kemonohashi has to explain to the uncultured simpleton that it's rice covered in his beloved black sugar syrup. The genius credits it with being the source of his brain power and explains that he also drinks black sesame paste to ward off anemia. Kemonohashi then turns his attention to the other guests. There is a couple there where an impatient man wants his wife to admire the delicious meal, and a young man by himself. Kemonohashi, only using 1% of his power, points out how they were told that there were 4 parties staying there in total, so it seems someone has yet to arrive. However, Toto is surprised when Kemonohashi says that 5 people is just perfect for something he has planned, and even more shocked when he reveals that it's the Game of Life board game. Playing the Game of Life at a hot spring is strangely on the list Kemonohashi made during his 5-year seclusion, so Totemaru is terrified of what else might be on that list. Kemonohashi surprisingly wants everyone to play, but Totemaru explains that everyone is still eating, and points out that it's more customary for people to play ping pong at hot springs. Kemonohashi agrees to wait on the fun for a while, so the two finish up their meal. Afterwards, they head to play a quick round of ping pong, where Kemonohashi finds an old scroll that tells the secret story of the Crimson Hue. This thing is pretty creepy looking, and Kemonohashi wonders if the death of a young woman really did dye all the waters red. They prepare for their match, but Kemonohashi wants to up the stakes, and decides that whoever loses will have to be the winner's slave for life. Kemonohashi isn't just a genius, he also has a powerful ping pong serve that Todo ends up sending straight through a window. Unfortunately, they only had one of those, so they head outside to retrieve it, but it's too cold and its mission failed. Kemonohashi points out that he won, so Todo is his slave now. His first task is to steal unsolved case files from the station, but that's impossible. We then see that the fourth party has arrived late to the hot springs. Surprisingly, it's Police Superintendent General Amamiya, but she has made a grave mistake. Afterwards, the boys find that Amamiya had won second prize at Japan Mart and point out to her that she walked into the men's bath. She is worried that Camu might think she is a pervert, but her embarrassment is spared when the woman in the couple yells out that she wants a divorce over something her husband said. He tries to tell her it was a joke, but she isn't buying it. The nosy Amamiya cries out that they shouldn't get divorced, but becomes upset when Totamaru wonders if she is drunk out of her mind. She heads to bed and the woman has calmed down a bit. Her husband recommends that she take a bath, so she agrees and apologizes for yelling. She leaves him there to just relax, giving our brilliant detective the perfect opportunity to ask the husband if he wants to play the game of life. The man agrees, so Kemonohashi asks the lonely guy if he wants a do-over on his very obvious tedious life. Todo asks him not to be rude, but the kid agrees to play anyway. Some time passes as Purplehead diligently checks the time, and the boys are in middle of an intense game of life. Kemonohashi is in last place, but he explains that that's only because he's playing fair this time. The young loner explains that he wishes they could really do their lives over this way, and so does the guy with the old ball and chain. It's pretty late, so they decide to call it a night, and leave the married guy with the most money to clean up since he is rich. They leave, but something isn't right as the instructor once again checks his watch. The next morning, a scream can be heard throughout the entire place. Amamiya is told by one of the workers that there's a dead girl in the women's bath. Everyone arrives shocked to see crimson leaves in the bath, along with the dead body. It's the man's wife named Sachiko, and her husband arrives shocked since he thought she was sleeping. Amamiya can tell from the rigor mortis that her time of death was sometime between midnight and 2 AM. If you thought her going into the bath was shocking, Kemonohashi one-ups her and gets up close and personal to the corpse like he always does, and promises it that he will avenge it. Kemonohashi points out that there aren't any obvious external injuries, but something clearly isn't right. Amamiya explains that there weren't that many fallen leaves there the night before, and the worker points out the obvious as the crimson layer on the water is like in the story. She thinks it might be a curse. Kemonohashi pretends to wonder this too, but explains that Detective Totamaru just can't stop doubting people. He gives Totamaru a hint to do his thing, so Totamaru goes straight into detective mode. He asks if anything strange was noticed between the hours of midnight and 2 AM, but the owner explains that the inn is small, so they take turns on the night shift. Octopus Head reveals that he had the night shift last night. He was watching over everyone so he can provide a statement. He points out how they all saw the same thing. Only one individual returned to their room before the wife left for hers. Everyone is shocked when they remember who that was, and Purplehead looks right at Detective Amamiya. The others can't deny that she left and begin to think that she is the murderer. Our brilliant detective knows better though and confidently states that it wasn't her. However, it is someone else who is right there with them now. The others push back a bit since she was clearly the only one to have left. Kemonohashi points out that it's true that Amamiya is the only one with an uncertain alibi, but her doing it is impossible. He is certain of this and he plans to prove it to them right now. Old Purple Hair gives a menacing look and is surprised to see that his chance to catch Kemonohashi investigating has come so soon. He is the great tracking instructor from Blue and declares in his mind that Kemonohashi is done for. He is then shocked when Kemonohashi reveals that everything he was just saying about solving the case was actually coming from Totamaru. Todo wishes he wouldn't get carried away, but Kemonohashi doubles down and puts on an absolute show. He pretends like Todo is telling him that they already have all the clues they need. In a panic, Todo can hardly form any words to say and just makes gasping noises. However, Kemonohashi takes those noises and makes them seem like clues about the illustration of the secret of Benezomi and the water turned red with leaves. Everyone is familiar with the secret story about the girl that was sacrificed, everyone except Amamiya. Everyone else saw it in the taxi on their way there, but Amamiya didn't take a taxi, and Totamaru realizes something. Kemonohashi pretends that he's just following Totamaru's lead and explains that Amamiya never even had the opportunity to see the pamphlet, so she didn't know the story. Therefore, she could not commit a murder made to replicate that story. This is why she isn't the culprit, and our brilliant detective makes sure to give all the credit to Totamaru. The others are convinced since that story is kept a secret and there's no other way she could have known about it. Amamiya breathes a sigh of relief, but Squidhead is disappointed that Totamaru was actually the one that made all those deductions. Kemonohashi then asks Totamaru who the real culprit is, but he wasn't prepared for that at all. Kemonohashi just makes it seem like Totamaru hasn't decided yet, and he wants to say it with just some curse. The inn worker says that it could be since she saw a strange white mist rising from the river just after dinner. She thought it might have been a spirit, and Kemonohashi calls Totamaru over. Toto thinks that he wants to show him a clue that will surely break this case wide open, but Kemonohashi just found their ping pong ball. Totamaru wants him to focus, but Kemonohashi just wants to look for something to get the ping pong ball. They are surprised to see a random bath mat, and still all our genius detective can think about is if it can reach his precious ping pong ball. Amamiya interrupts them, and Totamaru is certain that she's going to yell at him. However, she surprisingly thanks him for helping her, but it's pretty clear that her body is physically refusing to thank him, as it looks like her head is going to explode. She can't continue the investigation herself because of the doubt, so she leaves the rest to Totamaru. Toto is incredibly honored, but she reminds him that she doesn't expect anything good from him, it's just that he is the only one there. Amamiya says that nothing has been going right for her, and it all started when she walked into the wrong bath. This makes Kemonohashi realize something, and he compliments her on her good work. He tells her that she actually wasn't mistaken that night, but Sherlock's Riz hits harder than a tranquilizer dart, and she passes out. The police arrive, and purple-headed Four Eyes gives our boy a dirty look before they all return to their rooms. The tracking instructor goes into the room next to Kemonohashi's and plans something devious. Some time passes as the cops do their thing, and we see that Squidhead is trying to listen in on Kemonohashi through the wall with a noise-amplifying device. Totamaru arrives and explains to Kemonohashi that according to the medical exam, the cause of death was heart failure. According to her husband, she had a long-hanging heart condition. Purple Hair with the thinnest eyebrows you will ever see creepily listens in and desperately waits for Kemonohashi to say something that proves he has been investigating. Seemingly knowing everything, Kemonohashi says that there is a caterpillar on the wall and gives it a good whack, completely blowing up the instructor's ears. Toto points out that there was no bug, and Kemonohashi says of course there wasn't, he would never kill a bug anyway. Totamaru gets serious again and explains that he was told that the temperature difference between the inside and outside caused the heart failure. It was thermal shock. This is exactly as Kemonohashi expected. He states that everything is coming together now and tells Totamaru that he is up. Everyone gathers once more, and Totamaru declares that with the police's blessing, he will now solve the case. He reveals that it was definitely a murder, and the person who did it is there now. Totamaru gets right to it by pointing out that the murderer had to have known that the victim had a weak heart, so it had to be the husband. He admits to knowing about her condition being her husband and all, but says that he would never think of hurting his wife. Besides that, he points out that he was in the lounge with everyone else at the time of her death. Totamaru acknowledges this, but accuses him of only being with them so he could have an alibi. His real goal though was to set a very bold trap to lure his wife to her death. Totamaru then demonstrates how the husband left a bath mat covering the entrance to the bath to create a pitfall. Amamiya furiously points out that no one would fall for such a dumb trap, but Totamaru reveals that without her glasses, the wife had really poor vision. The bath mat was more than enough to fool the blind bat, and the trap made her fall into the bath. A bath she would never stop soaking in. The worker points out that it was thermal shock that actually killed her, and just falling into bath water isn't enough to stop a heart. Totamaru agrees, but then reveals that the bath wasn't actually filled with warm water in that moment, and it was actually freezing water. This is shocking as it's a free-flowing hot spring, so Totamaru has his assistant Kemonohashi retrieve something that has the husband shaking in his shoes. It's a rain gutter that he found discarded in the river. The husband knew there was an elevation difference between the river and the bath, so he used two rain gutters. One drew the water from upstream into the bath. Then by drawing the hot water from the bath into the river, he was able to create a freezing cold spring. That also explains the white mist the worker saw. It wasn't a cursed spirit, it was just good old science, since it was steam from the hot bath water hitting the cold river. The only hitch in the husband's plan was that the fallen leaves in the river from the heavy rains 2 days ago ended up in the hot spring. He couldn't pick out each individual one, so he decided to make use of the secret legend. He doubled down on the fallen leaves by adding more and tried to make it look like the curse of the sacrificed woman. The husband reaches for his last defense and reminds everyone that she died in the women's bath. A man couldn't sneak in there long enough to set all that up. Totamaru has an answer for that as well, pointing out that if the husband knew no one would be coming, then that wouldn't be a problem. At dinner, the husband overheard that Toto and Kemonohashi were going to play ping pong, so he knew no one would be in the men's bath for a while. He used that opportunity to swap the curtains marking the men and women's bath to send the ladies to the men's bath, ensuring that he would have the women's bath to himself. This also explains why Amamiya walked into the men's bath. Their ping pong match ended more quickly than the husband expected, so they went for a bath before he could swap the curtains back, and she walked in on them. The husband can't believe he is being accused and points out that there is no evidence. Of course, Todoromaru has a response to this as well, as he reveals that if they test the curtains, he is sure they will still find the husband's fingerprints. Those fingerprints have no reason to be there. He should have only been using the men's bath, so why would his prints be on the women's curtain rod? Todoromaru challenges him to explain his way out of that one, but the man can't and he says he has been checkmated. Todoromaru is just glad that he got all that out, and the husband turns to the worker to apologize for failing. She is shocked to see that he really ended his wife, but the man explains that he did it for her since she always said his wife was in the way. Amamiya is furious at the lowlife since he let the dark force of his simpness control him into ending his own wife over an affair. Everyone argues but are then shocked when the normally very calm Todoromaru loudly yells that the man ended his own wife. The man has no words left and is taken away. Todoromaru wonders where Komonohashi is and goes to look for him after he sees something weird. Todo checks the forest and is called over by Instructor Squid. Todo can hardly recognize him after his glow up, and the man explains that Komonohashi is just waking up. Todoromaru is then shocked to find Komonohashi tied up on a tree. Komonohashi thought that he was just in a hot spring filled with black sugar syrup, so Todoromaru must explain to the sugar lover that he was just dreaming. Purplehead finally introduces himself as Blue's tracking instructor named Spitfire. He reveals that he came to investigate whether Komonohashi was acting as a detective. Komonohashi mocks Spitz as he reveals that he spotted him all the way back at the store when they won the raffle. Komonohashi confidently points out that he didn't do anything and Todoromaru was the one that cracked the case. Spitz calls him a liar and hilariously says that a fool like Todoromaru, who didn't even notice him, couldn't possibly make such brilliant deductions. Todoromaru's pride is destroyed and Komonohashi tells Spitz to show him some proof. Spitz of course doesn't have any, but says he doesn't need any, since he is certain those were Komonohashi's amazing deductions. Komonohashi really starts antagonizing the guy now. He says that not only is Spitz bad at his specialty, shadowing and tailing, he is also illogical, and Komonohashi wonders how he became an instructor. On top of all that, he is a terrible kidnapper, just tying him up in a forest for anyone to see in broad daylight, and Komonohashi wonders how bad instructors are these days. Spitz doesn't seem to understand the situation, and tells Komonohashi that if he admits to investigating, he will ask for a lighter sentence. Komonohashi points out that Spitz definitely doesn't have the authority to do that, and begins doing his genius deducer thing. He points out that if Spitz were only there to see if he was investigating, he wouldn't need to disguise himself as a worker at the inn. However, Spitz still went through all the trouble of going undercover and interacting with them. If he was just there to observe, that would be very irrational. Not only is he exposing himself to his target, there's always the possibility that they might flee. Given Spitz's earlier threat, his phrasing, and his impatience, our big brain million IQ genius deduces that something else is at play. And it's a personal matter. Spitz either made a bet with someone about him investigating, or he was threatened. Komonohashi frees himself and wonders if there is a third reason. Perhaps Spitz is in need of his abilities. Spitz has taken enough of a beating from all the deducing, and admits to being utterly defeated. He desperately pleads for Komonohashi to lend him his skills. He explains that he only honed his tracking skills enough to become an instructor at Blue, so that he could find the best detective to solve the mystery of his missing family. Unfortunately, no one there could help him, and everyone he asked thought that only Komonohashi might be able to solve the case. Spitz is ecstatic that he was able to confirm that Komonohashi is the detective he had always been looking for, but Komonohashi refuses to help. Komonohashi points out that Spitz is an instructor at Blue. He doesn't even know him, so only a fool would trust him. Spitz explains that he is a pretty good guy, and he now feels really close to Komonohashi after investigating him for so long. Spitz is determined to prove his trustworthiness, and states that he will go tell his superiors that Komonohashi isn't doing any detective work. He says that he will help Komonohashi with his detective work as well, but Komonohashi reminds him that it's Todoromaru's detective work. Spitz shows that he is a fan as he offers a happy coat to Komonohashi. Komonohashi rejects this dude again, and Todoromaru tells him that Spitz doesn't seem like a bad guy. He wants Komonohashi to hear him out, so Spitz tells Todo that while he is not smart, he definitely has heart. He compliments Todo on solving the case, and leaves while telling them that he is available if they ever need a tracker. He takes off like Spider-Man, while stating that he will definitely earn Komonohashi's trust. Komonohashi is clearly going to turn him down, but does admit that Spitz's skills would be helpful in solving future mysteries. Komonohashi is intrigued by the missing family case, but he explains that he simply can't trust Purplehead, and if he betrays him, he is done for. However, Komonohashi trusts Todoromaru's judgment, and Todo said he was a good person. Todo thinks that puts too much pressure on him, but Kemonohashi says that they will simply have to see if he's trustworthy or not. Just like for everything else, Kemonohashi has a plan, and shocks Todo when he explains that he will just use spits until he drops. Toromaru knows that Kemonohashi isn't a bad guy though, as he has never seen him abandon someone who's in trouble. Toromaru thanks him for helping Amamiya in the murder case, but he says that he was merely fulfilling his duty. However, the next scene shows a guy looking in his fridge as he makes a menacing smile. Thanks for watching the first few parts of this recap. Subscribe and ring the notification bell for future parts.